As we look at geometric abstraction, it's important to understand what geometric and abstraction mean. Naturally, geometric is easy to understand. It's simply the use of geometric forms, like circles, squares, and triangles, in painting. Abstraction requires a bit more explanation. Abstract art is art that does not attempt to represent an accurate depiction of a visual reality, but instead uses shapes, colors, forms, and gestural marks to achieve its effect. Essentially, and at its core, abstraction is the distortion of form, away from an accurate representation of realistic form. Of course, this implies working from a realistic form or a representational form and then distorting it. The further we go with our distortion of the form, the more abstract the painting is. And relative to geometric abstraction, if we take the forms and make them into geometric shapes, then we're making geometric abstraction. The key point here is that abstraction always works from representational forms. It's important to remember that abstraction is different than non-representationalism. Non-representationalism doesn't use forms from the outside world. It doesn't use forms from external reality. Because of this, non-representationalism is sometimes called non-objective. Another thing to understand is that abstract and non-representational sometimes refer to the same thing. This is because in the early 1900s, abstraction was the first term used to describe paintings that had very distorted forms. This was before non-representationalism came into being. And then once non-representationalism became an established approach, the term abstraction stuck, and it was used to refer to both abstract and non-representational approaches. Of course, today, the correct usage would be to use abstraction to refer to painting approaches that worked with representational forms as a starting point, and similarly to use non-representationalism to refer to approaches that are purely invented and derived from the imagination, not from external sources. So as we see the term geometric abstraction, we know that this refers to simple geometric forms in non-illusionistic space. The forms used are non-objective, that is, they don't come from the outside world. Often the painting derives its inspiration from rhythm or interval or spacing of the used forms. During the first half of the 1900s, numerous artists explored geometric abstraction. The main artists involved with this were Hilma af Klint, Casmir Malovich, Piet Mondrian, Paul Klee, Wassily Kandinsky, Stuart Davis, and Ad Reinhardt. Then in the 1960s and 70s, there was a full-fledged movement called geometric abstraction. The main artists who took part in this were Frank Stella, Kenneth Nolan, Richard Aniszkiewicz, Ellsworth Kelly, Al Held, and Victor Vasarely. Hilma af Klint was a Swedish artist. She is considered to be the first artist to explore geometric abstraction and geometric non-representationalism. In much of her work, Hilma af Klint explored geometry, using it as symbol and metaphor to a spiritual dimension. Casmir Malovich was a Russian artist. In 1912, Malovich painted a simple black square. Altogether, he painted 4 black square paintings. Malovich believed that the black square, because it was a simple shape, represented all painting. In 1915, Malovich created a painting that has become known as the Red Square. However, Malovich's own title for the painting was A Peasant Woman in 2 Dimensions. Malovich said this painting was all about letting go of manifestations. He believed that red and white represented all the colors in the spectrum, and that by using these 2 colors, he had represented all colors. Over time, Malovich experimented with different images in his geometric approach. As time passed, Malovich experimented with color and more complex compositions. Piet Mondrian was a Dutch artist. Mondrian said, "Every true artist has been inspired more by the beauty of lines and color and the relationships between them than by the concrete subject of the picture." Mondrian said, "Art is not made for anybody and is at the same time for everybody." He said, "Just as pure abstract art is not dogmatic, neither is it decorative." Frank Stella was an American artist.
I mean, it seemed to me that you had to have some kind of way of addressing yourself to the viewer which wasn't so much of an invitation as it was a presentation. In other words, I made something and then it was available for people to look at, but it wasn't an invitation for them to explore, and it wasn't an invitation for them to read a record of what I had done exactly. If this presents a kind of visual experience to you that's really convincing, I think it can also be a moving experience. The edges here are actually fairly hard. I mean, they're not soft at all. You probably can't see the pencil line, but it's the same. It's drawn out on the canvas first and then taped over the line. There's no question that you have some illusionism and some kind of figure-ground relationships.
Larry Poons was born in Japan, but was considered an American artist.
I'd say the first major influential painter for me was probably Mondrian. I mean, I was never a student of painting in any kind of normal sense of the word, that I went to school and studied art history. Well, I thought it looked real groovy until I saw it on the wall. Well, I mean, when I'm putting color down and I'm thinking of what color am I going to put down next, I'm making the same kind of decision as I'm doing now, saying there's too much of that color or there's not enough of that color, dealing in a quantity of color at this point, rather than a specific color. That, you know, specific color is there. Now I'm dealing with the quantity, how much of it. You know, or saying, now if I do this, I wonder what this will look like. Do you see what I mean?
Poon said, "People would rather be shown how valuable you are, not told." Barnett Newman was an American artist.
You look at it and you see it. It's not in a window leading you into a situation where you walk through some either interior or exterior world from which you then come to a conclusion. The beginning and the end are there at once. My first painting, where I felt I had moved into an area for myself that was completely me, I painted in 1948. And it's, you know, it's a small red painting, and I put my so-called zip. Now, the thing I would like to say about that is that I did not decide to say to myself, I'm going to paint stripes. I suppose I thought of them as streaks of light. I stayed with that painting for about 8-9 months, wondering to myself, what had I done? What was it? And I realized that up until then, whenever I used that attitude, I was filling the canvas in order to make that thing very, very viable. I realized that I had filled the surface. It was full.
Kenneth Nolan was an American artist.
Morris and I used to talk about what we call one-shot painting. If you were in touch with like what you were doing, you only had to do it one time, and it had to stand. And everybody was assuming that the way you went about making art was to start out by drawing. That had been in the Western tradition. Artists would take a pencil and a piece of paper and make sketches, or they would make plans about how the thing was going to be organized and to imagine what the result was going to be. They were using drawing in order to structure where they put color, shapes, scales, depths, etc. You start with a roll of canvas and some paint, and it's a matter of getting those materials together in a drawing sense. Just how you handle materials, how thin or how thick the paint is, what the weave of the canvas is.
How do you apply the paint?
Sometimes with brushes, sometimes with sponges, sometimes with rollers. Any way that I can get it on where the tactile result is compatible with the nature of the kind of color I'm going to use there.
Mark Rothko was born in Russia, but was considered an American artist. Rothko always said that his primary concern was always with the emotional flavor of his paintings.
Technically speaking, Rothko's paintings are like, in a sense, giant whispers. What happens here is, because the surface is so simplified, the shapes are so simplified, the way that they're painted becomes extraordinarily important. And what's happening is that this pinky magenta color has been put down once, and then it's been painted over with a light color. And it's been painted unevenly, and it's the unevenness of it, the casualness of it, that allows all these different light effects to occur.
Richard Diebenkorn was an American artist.
It's a very complex activity, believe me, and I don't enjoy it all the time. When I do enjoy it, it's marvelous. But there are times when somehow the inertia is very resistant, and I can't get things going, or they get going sort of, and go slowly and badly, and this isn't fun, really. But then my hope is that I can kind of get things into just that relationship where some kind of continuity materializes. Well, I think I have to violate the canvas in some way or other. Sometimes they're just too pristine looking and too kind of perfect to do anything on. But when they get a bit besmirched, well then they're fair game.
Alge came to prominence in the 60s and 70s. He was particularly known for his large-scale hard-edge paintings, and as an artist transitioned throughout his career through numerous different styles.
I think of myself as basically a synthetic painter, not a painter, not a natural painter or a painter of natural sensibilities, but a painter of ideas and synthetic constructs. I felt that I really needed to rethink my whole worldview about getting to the essence of things or getting to the truth in one thing or another, and began to doubt that there was such a thing as the truth or a truth, and began to get much more interested in multiplicity and complexity and ambiguity, but it all has to do with sort of like searching out imagery that I feel some kind of relationship to. None of these paintings are planned from the beginning. They all evolve.